An interest in people and the way their work defines them is what makes writer, director, novelist, and sometimes actor John Sayles unique. And that's what we'll be delving into on Independent Focus.
This is kind of different from the stuff I normally see at the moment.
You're stuck with one interpretation.
Hollywood loves these guns, and it's all like
because if the film doesn't hit, then you're really screwed.
Certain movies kind of unnerved me a little more than others. They just didn't have anything to say at that time.
I sold just about everything I owned.
It's like I write the script, I rehearse the actor.
The big difference that more money gives you is just more
Talk is very cheap to shoot.
Sit up here and pontificate about filmmaking.
tend not to have studios telling me what to do.
Thank you.
So, what's interesting about this movie, Limbo, and the way, to me, it relates to a lot of your work, is that it's about the way people's work kind of defines them, or in this case, lack of work defines them. Mm-hmm. That's kind of been a big theme in your work, hasn't it?
Yeah, and you know, for me, you know, I was raised Catholic, and there is the Catholic, you know, fine definition of limbo, which is it's where the souls of people who weren't baptized go, who you know, didn't get the chance to be officially good or bad.
So they're heathens.
Yeah, they're heathens, and there is no end to that. Purgatory, there was a toss-up, depending on which nun you talked to, about whether purgatory was just a nice waiting room, and then you got into heaven, and the punishment was that you weren't in heaven yet, or if it was just like hell, and you were burning in a lake of fire, and then after a certain amount of time, you got into heaven. But there was an end to it. Limbo is infinite. You're there forever. And the most striking example of limbo in this film is David Strathairn's character, Joe, who's a guy who's, because of this things that's happened to him, because he's been punished for his hubris, on his best day, when he was doing everything really well, he caught so many fish that his boat sank. You have a guy who's not taken a risk emotionally or physically in 25 years. That could be a bad relationship that you stay in forever. It could be a job that you kind of hate, but you're so scared of being unemployed that you don't quit it. It's that fear. I think a lot of people live in those kind of limbos where they're just moving along. It could be a whole culture that's living, you know, under bad government. And the thought of the hell that you could fall into if you try to have a revolution or change things is so frightening that you don't try for heaven. So you just stay there. And you're not in hell, but you're not very happy either.
But your last picture, Men with Guns, is literally about the ascension to heaven, isn't it?
Well, it's the ascension to heaven that may not be there. You know, at the end of Men with Guns, you have a kind of a similar situation as the end of this picture, where you have these kind of indigenous people who have climbed to where there's the rumor that there's a place where you can live without there being any soldiers, any men with guns. But if you cut down enough foliage to grow crops, their helicopters will see you, and you'll be found out, and it won't be heaven anymore. However, if you don't cut down that foliage, you won't be able to grow any crops, and you'll starve to death. So actually, the two movies have a very, very similar ending in that you don't know what's going to happen next, but people have at least taken that chance to go there.
But the ending, certainly, of Men with Guns is a lot more hopeful than this.
Oh, I think this is hopeful in that you have three people who, despite all the baggage that they brought, you know, and talking about Alaska as being this kind of land of second chances, both Donna and Joe are people who are getting a second chance. They're over 40. You know, they've had a lot of failures behind them. That often makes people, you know, really reticent to open themselves up, to become vulnerable to somebody else again. A lot of people, they're in one bad marriage, and they may get married again, but they never really open up again. They never really give themselves. And so here's these people who've gotten over, you know, some pretty heavy stuff to become a family at the end. They're just facing a very uncertain future. If you think about the ending of The Graduate, it seems to end with this really high note where Dustin Hoffman drags Catherine Ross out of this wedding that she shouldn't be in, and they jump on the bus, and then Mike Nichols holds the camera on them, sitting beside each other for an uncomfortably long time, and you realize, oh, these people have come together, but they're facing a very uncertain future. In fact, they have a good chance of becoming their own parents. Now, you don't know, and depending on whether you're optimistic or pessimistic, you're going to go one way or the other. So I wouldn't say that it's a hopeful ending or a non-hopeful ending. I think really what I'm saying is in a movie like Limbo that's very much about risk. I think there's an important phrase in the movie where the developer says, you know, what do you get when you get on a roller coaster? Not real risk, but the illusion of risk, where you go through all these twists and turns, and by the end of it, you know, you realize, well, it's Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan, and they're going to get together, you know, or it's Harrison Ford, and they're not going to kill him. I'm asking the audience in this movie, Limbo, to take real risk.
Because the earlier movies seem to be about younger people who have this hope that they can do something in the world. As we get to these movies now, Men with Guns and Limbo, I don't want to say cynical, but it seems to be a lot more despairing.
I think there actually is a very strong progression. If you look at, you know, maybe 3 of my movies, you look at something like Baby It's You. It's about kids in high school. And kids in high school, anything is possible. They're very hopeful about the future. They're just beginning to find in Baby It's You that there might be a ceiling on something. There may be some things that they can't do. Vincent Spano's character, he's a working class kid, and he hits that ceiling a lot quicker than Rosanna Arquette's character, who's you know, this college, you know, prep kid from a wealthy family. By the time you get to something like, Passion Fish, here's these people and they're turning 40. They're realizing, well, I'm not going to become Meryl Streep. You know, I'm still working on a soap opera, and I've just been paralyzed from the waist down, and maybe I won't even be able to have a kid. What do people in a success-oriented society like the United States do when all of a sudden they realize, I can't be president? You know, I can't do everything. Despite what the advertisements on TV say, I can't have everything, do everything, be everything. There are limitations. And some of them are just, I'm too old now.
Do you think of the characters first and then build a story around that, or what?
I think it's usually a basic situation and a couple characters. And it's almost like mixing chemicals, that if you know, I started as an actor. I was an actor before I was a writer or a movie person.
Talk about some of the parts you played as an actor.
When I was an actor, I mainly played large people of low intelligence. I was Lenny in Of Mice and Men, and I was Chief Bromden. Although he was smart, he had just been zapped in the head a lot of times. And One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and I played the Tom in The Glass Menagerie, and I liked acting. And one of the things I liked about it the most is that you didn't have to be anybody who was yourself. They gave you the lines. And they even gave you, if you paid attention and you thought about it, a way of seeing the world. I was in 2 different productions of Mice and Men, playing 2 different characters. And when you enter that world, that bunkhouse, as different characters, it's a totally different play. You hear different lines, you see different things. When you fully imagine a character and they have their own way of seeing the world and their own things that they want, and then you imagine another character and they have their way of seeing the world and things that they want, and then you put them in a room together, you've got these 2 active chemicals, and you mix them together and they're going to have a certain reaction. The more complex they are, and the more complex the situation is, the more possible reactions you can have. And that's a lot of what directing on the set is about kind of being like the manager of 2 different fighters. And very often, I very, very rarely work with actors together.
Why?
Because they shouldn't know what the other one is going to do next exactly. They know too much already, which is what the line the person is going to say. They shouldn't also know the way he's going to do it. Usually I'll take one in one corner and I'll say, okay, this time, whatever you do, don't let him get through the door, because if he gets through the door, the conversation is over, and you're not going to be able to catch him. You're not going to be able to change his mind if he gets through the door. And then you go to the other person and say, listen, don't let him catch you in this room and block you off. You got to get out of here. You got things to do. Now that, in that particular take, is going to end up in them really kind of fighting over the door. In another take, you might say, look, you got all the time in the world. This is your office. This time, don't even try to leave. Just sit back. You're in control of this thing. And maybe you go to the other one and say, okay, you're really nervous about this and you're not sure you should even be asking him for this kind of thing. I mean, the hardest thing for an actor to do is to not play the end of a scene at the beginning of the scene. Not play the end of the movie at the beginning, because you know it's going to happen.
How do you build a relationship where you can get some unpredictability out of the performance?
I probably change maybe 2 lines per movie. So it's not about ad-libbing. It's about me leaving some room for the actor.
But you're trying to create reality there, though, right?
Yeah, but you have to just tell the actor who they are, what the situation are, what the lines are, and then really depend on them to pay attention to the other people in the scene, so that they're not going home at night and saying, this is what I'm going to do tomorrow, and rehearsing in their head, and this is who I'm going to be. They're going in the next day and say, this is who I am, this is a situation I'm in, I don't know who that other person is going to be, and I don't know how they're going to come at me, so that they're reacting. So if the other person comes harder at them, maybe they push back harder. If the other person moves away, maybe they move away. There is some kind of alive thing happening in front of the camera. Also, I don't do that many takes. I don't rehearse. We do blocking rehearsals, kind of no acting rehearsals. You're going to walk over here, you're going to walk over here. Okay, you guys got focus, let's go. So that you see in the movie is the first, second, or third take. And you still have a little bit of the shock of the new.
In all your movies, you're kind of a little oblivious, let's say.
When I act in my own movies, I don't have that much time to work with the other actors. I don't have that much time to think about where I am. So I always take a character who is the same at the beginning, middle, and end. So in 8 Men Out, I played Ring Lardner, who's just a sports writer. He's the same guy at the beginning and at the end because he's not in the fix. Even in probably the biggest role I took was in City of Hope, who's this guy Carl, who's an asshole, but he's the same asshole throughout the movie. So you just know who the character is, you get in front of it. Probably the best part I ever played for a director was in Matewan. I play this kind of hell and brimstone preacher. And I didn't even need to learn anybody else's lines because all I did was preach and people said amen. And which is obviously what directors always want them to say.
What's it like for you when you're brought in by to work on another director's project as a writer? I mean, what's that like? What was it like for you on Apollo 13?
Well, really, each time out as a writer for hire, your mandate is different. I've been just given a book and say, make this into a movie or an idea. Rob Reiner once said something like, Oliver Stone shouldn't own the 60s. Make a movie about write a movie about the 60s. And he gave me just a couple little plot parameters and sent me off. I've been brought in for things as specific as this one character is one-dimensional. We start shooting Monday, it's Friday, can you flesh them out? I've been brought in to change cowboy dialogue that sounded a little too British into something that sounded a little too American, which is kind of considered a dialogue polish. Other times I've gotten jobs where they've said in the cover letter, we feel the script needs work in dialogue, characterization, plot, and tone. I've gotten to work with Rob Reiner and Ron Howard and Sidney Pollack and Steven Spielberg and Billy August and really a lot of cool directors and seeing how they do things.
And does that change the way you work at all?
It changes the possibility of what you could do. And I think eventually, as you think about, oh, this person gets away with doing this, it probably does change the way you might try something that you might not. For instance, Ron Howard is very, very open with everybody's ideas. And he just uses the ones he likes and doesn't use the ones he doesn't. He runs much more, it seems like much more of a democracy. than what I do. You know, he had a run through before Apollo 13 where all the actors read their parts and talked about them. You know, I don't do a run through. You know, the part's written. You know, and that's a day we'd have to pay people to come in, where I wouldn't get anything on film.
Let's talk about that, because a lot of your movies clearly are done on the run. I mean, you don't have a lot of money to work with, so what does that end up doing to you?
Just you think the thing through a lot. Also, a lot of what I do is because I edit them as well, is I'm editing while I'm writing. It's much cheaper to cut out 2 pages, even if it's a line at a time, or a little quarter-page scene at a time in the script than it is to shoot them and then cut them out later. You know, you can save yourself 2 days of shooting just by cutting, you know, 3 pages worth out of a script. I'm editing a lot while I'm directing. So very often, you know, I'll be moving the camera and going to another scene, and the actors kind of feel like, well, wait a minute, you know, we never got through the scene without blowing a line. And I'll say, but you blew a different line every time. I was editing, you know, with the help of the script supervisor, and I realized I have the first half of the scene nailed with the 3 angles I have and the actor that I have so far. Really, we need just this one line. That's the only thing missing. And we'll do one more take, and the rest of the take may be rocky, but if we've got the camera on the person who has that one missing line and they really nail it, we can go. You don't need a perfect master shot unless you're going to use just a master shot there. My first movie, Return of the Secaucus 7, we made for $40,000.
How long a schedule? How many days?
It was 25 days. And one weekend, because we were getting our film by Greyhound bus in New Hampshire, and we weren't going to get another bus up there until Monday, and we had a big scene to shoot in a bar. We were going to get this bar for 26 hours, and we had 11 pages to shoot, and it was really very complicated stuff. And I realized at the beginning of the day, we might run out of film, and then we're really screwed. We're not going to get this bar left. I'm going to totally rewrite the script. What am I going to do? So I just got very, very careful with, you know, I would start a scene in a 2-shot, and then I'd say, okay, once I go from the 2-shot to a single, I'm never going to go back to the 2-shot. I make that now. So I wouldn't even do a whole master of the wide shot. I'd just go 5 lines in, and I'd cut. And then I'd back them up 2 lines, and I'd do the singles from there. So I was basically already editing the way you would a 3-cam. At one point, we had somebody singing a song, and I wanted some different angles of the song. And I figured, oh, this could take forever. It's a 3-minute song, and if I do it from 4 different angles, but what if he blows a line? And, you know, so I've just, you know, blah, blah, blah. We had 2 cameras. We had because it was shot in 16, both the operator and the cinematographer had a camera. And so what I did is I got 2 long sticks, and I said, okay, you roll first, and when I tap you twice on the leg, you stop rolling. And when I stop you, zoom in. Okay, when I tap you once, you start rolling. And when I tap you twice, you stop and you zoom in. And so basically, we just did the song one time, and I started this guy in kind of a wide shot, and then I started this guy and I stopped this guy, and this guy zoomed in, and then I started this guy and I stopped this guy, and then this guy zoomed in, and so we probably shot about 6 minutes and 15 seconds of song, of footage, but we got 4 different angles and covered a whole song.
So you basically always had to know what you wanted.
Yeah, you had to know what you wanted and what you could get away with. So I'd say in my first 5 movies, there was rarely a scene where I wasn't feeling like there's a better way to do this now. Not that I'm going to discover while I'm in the editing room, but right now I know there's a way that's a better way of doing this. We don't have the time or money to do it.
There are also a lot of very simple shots in the movies too.
Yeah,
Early pictures.
yeah, and that's planning. I mean, usually the first shot I do in a movie is something very, very complicated with all the equipment we have, just to see what the crew can handle. And in Secaucus 7, it was clear that we just weren't going to be able to have many moving shots. So the movement that you see in the movie is mostly sports stuff that is handheld, because our operator, you know, covered football games and used to He used to photograph skiing for Warren Miller, who made these ski films, where you ski downhill and you shoot between your legs at the guy skiing behind you. So he's a very good handheld operator. And so we had a couple sports scenes where he handheld them, and the rest of it we didn't. We had like one dolly shot in the whole film, and no cranes or anything like that. I mean, it's a bit of a handcuff. I mean, there's things that would be nicer if you could have done things differently, but you just say, this is what we've got. I'm going to do the best with what we've got, and you make that decision at the outset. Is this a movie I can do well? Not perfectly, but well for this amount of money. And if it's not, you say, well, let's write a movie that I can do well for this amount of money.
All right, take some questions from the audience now. Anybody questions?
Hi, I understand you've worked primarily with Maggie Renzi as a producer. I was wondering if you could talk about that relationship, if you go about getting financing together.
With Maggie as a producer, each time it's been kind of different. She's basically had to go out in the world, sometimes with co-producers, sometimes not, and just see what's out there. Sometimes, it's been appropriate for us to go to major studios first. Sometimes not. Sometimes we've gone and gotten financed by people who were home video companies, and we got the home video sold first, and then they helped us go look for a theatrical distributor. Sometimes it's been independent money.
Another question?
Hey, John, how you doing? Do you talk to yourself when you write?
I don't talk to myself when I write, but when I'm done, I play every part. And I do that just so that I'm sure that the people are a little more three-dimensional. If I was an actor and I had to play this part, man, woman, or child, is there enough there? Is it consistent? Would I know who I am? And I might add one or two lines to each of the characters. And I think it's one of the reasons in our movie that the secondary characters kind of creep up toward being primary characters.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Let me ask you about working for Roger Corman. You Battle Beyond the Stars, and certainly the legendary Piranha.
Yeah, I think that the thing working with Roger Corman, a couple things. One is that with big studios, they have the money and the will to develop many things and then only make a few of them. If Roger paid you for a script, he was going to make it. So I wrote three things for Roger, 3 things got made in very, very short order. So you get to see your work up there, you see what works and doesn't work, you have your idea of how it could have been better, how it could have worked, or if it was a problem with the writing. You learn what's labor intensive and what's capital intensive. They would be very specific notes that I'd get, which would be things like, okay, we've just had 2 attacks, the audience needs a little breather here. So give us about 3 to 4 pages where nobody gets attacked. Or maybe there's just the threat of an attack of piranhas and it turns out to be a false alarm, which is, as I was talking before, is that roller coaster. You need a little bit of uptime for the down to be exciting again.
I think we're going to let John Sayles leave with both lungs intact. Let's thank John Sayles for being here.